Hey everyone, we have our old friend Steve Flanagan with us. And Steve, we haven't spoken to you since before the election, so glad you can come back on. Um, Although it's been quiet times ahead, I think is we got a busy week coming up. What are your thoughts
Yeah, we were just talking there ahead of time. Let's get it over with. Let's lower rates. you know,
globally?
um, it's so silly that the central bankers are trying to, say that we've got forward guidance again. In Europe they're saying, well, it's data dependent. It all depends. What are you talking about? You got like anemic growth, if you want to call that growth. In the UK, look at the last retail sales numbers along with this budget that was just put on with this massive amount of new taxation.
Yeah,
Yes, they're going to have some stimulus in the job commute, but that's going to take years. But those taxes are hitting right away.
that's right. That's
So,
right.
you've got the what, Bank of Canada lined up. Before that, you have RBA tonight. They say RBA is going to punt again and do nothing. Okay, fine. That's at their own demise. In case they're looking at China, they better take a quick look that that's not doing so great. And then Bank of Canada, followed by SMB and ECB. And the only one on the slate here that seems like it's going to make another drastic move is Canada, where they think they're going to drop another 0.5%. But I just wish they'd all coordinate here and just cut rates. Inflation's down. Look at the price of oil. What are we waiting for? And that's what kind of my theme as I'm looking in this week.
You think cutting rates in the U.S. is justified?
I think 0.25% at this time. They did the right thing by going that full half, but I think that if they don't cut, you're going to end up with a dollar problem because it's going to start. You're going to see the dollar index, back up above 108. I think the U.S. probably could go 0.25% and then become a little bit more hesitant on the next one because we're the only ones pumping in growth. But eventually, what's going on outside of the U.S. is going to start being an anchor around us.
Yeah,
See, China's starting to buy gold again.
Yeah, I think I don't know if you guys like the Bitcoin. I mean, I think above 100,000. Yeah, we may. I don't know what the sky is, the top there, but we've got to remember that it's clearly a small market when compared in foreign exchange, and they don't have the rules that really establish a price. There's still front running that goes on that market and all sorts of shenanigans. So price structure is very poor.
but that is getting better. I know a lot more institutions are getting involved in it. There's a lot more institutional platforms. Yeah, there's the stories of the pump and dump with some of the shit coins, for lack of a better term. But if you stay to the established um, digital currencies, I don't know where it goes. It's kind of fearful. We met the target, 100,000. Now they just raised the target. People are saying it's going to $1 million. I don't know.
I keep thinking of Warren Buffett saying, when your cab driver starts to give you stock tips, it's time to get the hell out of the market.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
and everybody, some guy bought Bitcoin. He bought 100 shares of some Bitcoin ETF 5 years ago. Now he's a genius. It reminds me of the gold bugs from years ago. You go to the exchange in Chicago and you meet some 22-year-old kid who happened to take a position in XYZ, and now he's a superstar. He's a genius.
Right.
It really doesn't take much. It's only one
Especially
rocket
with
to
big
fame.
leverage. Yeah, if you get big leverage, it's very easy, you know, to,
yeah.
to go up the ladder and right back down.
I mean, the move from what 70,000 is really on this new administration coming
Yeah.
in, which is apparently, you know, very pro crypto. And looking to establish, actually reserves in Bitcoin. So, if you begin to look at a simple supply and demand, yeah, I can understand it going up. But, you know, I just don't see the price structure in that marketplace. If the United States were to announce that they're moving into a reserve of Bitcoin, where do you put the top? 150,000, two
Yeah.
hundred thousand.
I had
Yeah.
felt that AI and quantum computers were going to kill Bitcoin. I had it in the low 40s, an ETF, and I got out around 75 or thereabouts, and I thought I was the smartest guy in the world. Because I really think that Bitcoin mining, now with quantum computers and AI, is going to be a much quicker thing. I mean, these are monster computers. They're doing things,
If you were
I saw
fearful
a
that they would break
presentation.
the codes, right? People would be with AI be
Well,
able to
yeah,
break codes.
that number one, you break the codes, but even two, just to mine the stuff, it's got to be
It's
faster to mine it with these
funny you
machines.
say that, Tim, because look at the stocks that are really starting to gather a lot of impetus right now are the quantum computing stocks. And there's a lot of people saying that, they're on the verge of, making some major pushes here. And clearly, if that happens, that's going to be a negative in that mining space for cryptos.
I have lunch every Thursday with a group, and one of the guys on the group was the founder of Cray Computers, and he did a presentation for us about 2 weeks ago. And the numbers elude me, but the magnitude of speed with quantum computers and AI computers, mind-boggling, mind-boggling. It makes these things we're working archaic, you know.
Yeah.
And I got to think that some kid, where as long as he's got the power, the energy
Yeah.
to run these searches, they're going to be able to crack these codes pretty quickly, or at least mine the Bitcoin much faster. So
And
when he said this to me, I said, I'm getting the hell out, and I got
yeah, and
out
of
too early,
course,
and I kicked myself in the ass.
yeah,
But now guys are starting to talk about 200,000 and three. God knows where it goes, but
yeah.
to me, the logic of this kind of computing horsepower that we're on the threshold of could really change everything.
Well, I just came back from a family vacation, and a number of the younger clan are all talking like 200,000, three. And I said, well, you need to understand one thing. If Bitcoin is going to go mainstream and the United States is going to get involved, the central banks of the world are never going to allow a unregulated medium of exchange back. You know, from our days, they did the Plaza Accord, the Louvre Accord, and they got their arms around the monetary system and anti money laundering. They're not just going to open up the doors again on that. So, first and foremost, that's going to happen. And secondly, if you can increase the supply through quantum computing, I have a good friend who's pretty close in that field. And he said to me when I asked him about 2 months ago, which led me to look at some of these companies and invest in them. He said, think about it this way. If we said today was a biplane which was flying in World War One, the quantum computing day is an F-35 Raptor, a stealth technology. That's the difference in computing. And I went, okay, quickly, immediately hit the computer and started looking up companies.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know what you said. You said the supply. All right, the supply is finite. Let's go that way. But mining the supply is going to be a much cheaper operation, and that's democratized. You've got much bigger computer power in a lot more hands.
Mm,
So I would think just the whole mining of the process is going to change. The supply may not change, but the ability to build that supply will change.
yeah. And if you begin to talk about the ability to crack the codes, well, then that just opens up an entirely new sphere. And I think that if they solve a lot of the problems and put a lot of the price structure in place, then you'll begin to bring in the Black Rocks of the world where they begin to look at it. But I don't think that the big investing community, the real money managers, are jumping at that space just yet. They prefer to look at Nvidia and stocks that
Yeah,
have a
second
more
derivative, first derivative
Yeah, there's
plays.
huge
exactly.
wild cards. Until an insurance company says, you know what, I will insure your Bitcoin deposit,
Right.
against theft. Nobody's going to be able to steal your Bitcoin, and I'll insure it. Until that moment, I'm not really comfortable, you know, with the whole idea. Plus, you've got wild cards inside various governmental agencies. Like, for example, I used to feel that the euro was vulnerable because in some country, maybe Italy, somebody would come to the fore and say, I'm just, we're not going to honor that.
Mm,
And now, you'll get a populist in a country that says, we're being taken advantage of, so we're going to run our own country, our own currency again. I always felt that. In fact, I spent years writing a derivative. I still have it,
Right.
for arbitraging the internal countries. And Bitcoin sort of represents that to me. I mean, what if China were to say, we're not going to honor contracts
oh
that
boy.
are underwritten with Bitcoin. You know,
Mm,
I mean, what's to stop a government from saying that? We're just any contract that you write that has Bitcoin to satisfy it is null and void.
yeah.
Where do you go then? You know, and I'm
Well, I
not
think the
saying it's going to
Chinese,
happen.
I think the Chinese have said that a couple of times, right? They wouldn't allow the public to buy Bitcoin 5, 10 years ago, and you'd have those big swoops down, and then gradually,
Well,
slowly.
listen, we're in a country where FDR confiscated your gold.
That's
Right.
right.
So why is this so crazy? You know,
Yeah. Yeah. Nothing's
That's right.
crazy.
One
And now, Steve,
comment.
I see behind you the Japanese flag,
Yeah.
and I've been reading. One guy I read a lot talks about the equity market and the U.S. overall as like Japan in the '90s. And at the time in the '90s, Japan, you were on Good Morning Japan, right? You
Yeah.
spent a lot of time in Japanese banks at trading the yen. What's your feeling about that? His point was, back then, Japan, the postage size piece of real estate was worth more than Manhattan, right? You had the Japanese buying the golf courses down in California. Just Japan was everybody wanted to be in it, and then all of a sudden it took 30 years for them to come back out.
Right.
What's your thoughts? Is that do you see something similar here, or is that just far fetched?
We remember those days, Pebble Beach,
Yeah,
Rockefeller Center, right?
yeah,
Remember, if you even think about the top Japanese banks, Daiichi Kango Bank, and none of them
yeah.
exist today, right? So,
Right, right.
but I am I'm very bullish on the yen right now. Why? I just think that Japan has fought deflation for 20, 25 years, and they're just coming out of it. I often told people, I said, everybody raising rates, what, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, and I said, everybody raising rates. Japan is still negative. They're still zero. Is anybody like paying attention? Like the G3? Like Japan is like going, we're not touching rates. Why not?
Right.
What do they see that nobody else sees? And I kind of think that they're the ones that are really leading. Even right now, their rates are so low, but they will be raising rates. And I think all this money that's tied into the yen carry trades are going to have to start covering their yen exposure.
wow, that's a
So,
that's a massive deleveraging. That's
Yeah.
like
well,
raising reserve requirements on the U.S. dollar.
I mean, Tim, how long have they been carry trading this yen?
Yeah.
What, 10 years, 15
Yeah.
years?
right?
Probably more than that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I and the parallel I have is I look at China today and I'm like, you guys better wake up because if you think you're insulated from the deflationary environment, even the rest of the world, that's what they've, we had rates at zero for how long because we were all petrified of deflation. Now we've raised rates, but they better get on the stick and lowering rates again because it's deflation that the world has to be very careful of. And we look at Japan as the primary, source of it. And I think China's experiencing that. They're going to have to get their rates much lower. But I like the yen because I think that they're in the locomotive. They're at the front of the train. And I think they've turned the corner first. So I like the idea of that double bang, having a long yen position with perhaps a long equity position in Japan.
All right, let's probe that.
Yep.
Let's examine that. Why do you feel we're on the cusp of a global disinflation or deflation?
Well, I think that prices in general, because of the hidden factor to me, is technology. Technology advances are, we've just come out of the starting blocks here. And, we touched on quantum computing, AI, machine learning. Just look at the advances that, we have in computers in robots throughout this country right now and what Tesla is looking at. All this is going to be a massive boom to productivity and that's going to be an overhang to prices. So I think that prices have peaked only because of a supply and demand problem during COVID, but prices are going down. In the
So,
bigger, longer term,
so
3 to 5
you
year.
you see a supply side revolution
Yes.
emanating specifically from the technological advances, AI and quantum, I
And
guess.
I think that they're just beginning. When I left J.P. Morgan 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, I turned and my last words to the desk were, you guys better get ready because the technology gains that I helped pioneer in their e-commerce trading, along with a tremendous group of, staff and guys there, but it's just begun. It's only just begun to come mainstream. I mean, and that's obvious by just looking at the demand that Nvidia keeps talking about for their chips. They're like, wow, get in line. Look at Tesla paid $1 billion premium just to get this new advanced Nvidia chip.
So
So,
output will bring prices down,
yep.
and will it neutralize the debt?
Oh, well, the debt's a whole nother issue, Tim.
Well, it's the opposite side
Yeah.
of it's inflation. The debt the debt is, and they used to say that depression is rage expressed inward. Well, inflation is debt pressed into the currency. You know,
Yeah.
so I think the debt offsets a lot of it. It's a fair argument though. I mean, I'm with you with respect to technological
Productivity.
advances and stimulating productivity and output more than productivity. Just the GDP is going to rise. I can see 5, 6, even 7% GDP coming as we lower energy prices and couple that with technology. So I'm on your side there, but this debt overhang has to be
I
eroded
think I'm losing you
from the
guys
outset.
here. I'm going to reconnect.
Okay. Wait for Steve to come back on in a minute. Interesting point. All right, Steve
Okay,
is
so I
back.
was just asking you then,
Yeah.
we had a little technical problem, but will this explosion in productivity and output that we see be enough to neutralize or at least mitigate the effect of the debt?
A month and a half ago, I'd say that's going to be a really tough balancing act. However, with the new incoming administration talking about 2 trillion in dropping the size of our
Thanks.
government, then now I'm going to say that the prospects for a balanced budget could be in place at some point in the near term. In which case, I'm heavy on the technology side of advancements, and I'm not as concerned on debt yet. Originally, before this election, I had felt that the 2029 would become the 100-year anniversary of the Great Depression,
New crash.
and it was going to be a result of the debt explosion. If we can get our hands around the debt, which seems to be what they want to do, that's a good thing. That's going to be probably one of the most positive things that can happen in the financial markets.
I don't know if you saw the last couple of episodes that Tim and I did, but the last one we did, I labeled it "Builders Build" and Trump's solution to fix the ailing economy. Basically, it's building it's refurbishing an old house that hasn't been updated in 40 years. And as Tim said, sometimes you have to live with through the pain where the windows are broken and you have to fix the windows and there's no heat. So
Yeah,
ultimately you'll get to the point, yeah, where it's
the
fixed.
layoffs,
I
the
just
layoffs that are ahead, and we've lived on federal debt. There's been a sugar rush here
Yeah.
because the economy has all the growth in the jobs has been federal growth. So now that's all going to go. I mean, if you were Doge, right? They put you in charge of Doge, and you worked alongside Elon Musk and Vivek. I mean, I know the first question I would ask: give me a list of everybody who's dead who cashed the Social Security check. You know,
Yeah.
there's all kinds of low
Yeah.
hanging fruit around, and you got Democratic governors and Democratic mayors trying to figure out how to insulate themselves against Trump's action. California, seventh largest economy in the world, is
Yep.
trying to de-Trumpify and neutralize any impact Trump has. So the question number one, I think, is that, are they going to let Trump govern? And then number two, will they be successful ultimately in getting their arms around this problem? I'm a little optimistic. I think they probably will. But
I think if they try to stand in his way with the type of turnout that he got, they're going to risk an incredible voter backlash in 2 years, and they'll completely lose Congress.
Well,
If we remember back,
but that's assuming that in 2 years they can start to do the work. In 2 years, we might be living through 2 years of suffering, getting the debt down, slowing the government. That's the key question.
I think there's so much waste in there that you could easily cut out a massive amount and it would have no bearing on our economy. Not to mention, if we keep that simple pie of liquidity and the government is in there taking what, 1/3 of it? That's 1/3 that the private sector has to compete for through credit, restrictions, and everything else. When we talk about the technology boom that's potentially on our doorstep right now, if you begin to pull the federal government out of that pool of liquidity, it's only going to create, more private consumption of that liquidity, which is a great thing because the other thing I saw was that this Doge group, the first thing they're going to do, and they expect 10%, is who wants early retirement and to take advantage of that. And you could quickly get a 10% of the workforce out just on that alone.
and another 10% saying you got to come into work. You have to commute. So
Right.
some of them are going to drop out of that too.
Right. So that's could be a massive amount that you're not it's not going to have the effect that everybody's worrying about. You get people retiring, they're going to start taking their pensions and they're going to start spending money. So,
Let's hope. You know, I'm I'm optimistic, but what was Reagan's old term? Um, uh, Trust but verify.
yeah.
Right? That's where I think we're at. I trust that he can get it done, but I want to see some results. And the fact that they're giving himself a year and a half to do it, I give them a lot of. I put nothing beyond Elon and Vivek. I think they can do whatever they put their mind to it. It's just
I
living
made
through the
the
pain.
analogy last week, Steve, that everybody's looking at the artist rendition of what it's going to look like when we're done.
Mm,
But they're ignoring the fact that we got to knock down the walls and we're going to have dust and stuff all over the place and we got to put new plumbing in. And, that whole period we've sort of brushed past. The markets have. They've been euphoric. So I guess long term, I think we're going to get there because we sort of have to get there.
right.
The alternative was just too devastating to look at. We were looking at really bad. We were on a bad path.
Bad path.
Yeah.
Yeah, you kick
Y-
the can down the road for 40 years, and sooner or later you're going to have to pay the piper.
we just need to get out of that. Every time you want to do another thing, you'd have to turn and say, raise this group's taxes, raise that group's taxes, create another usury tax. If you want to drive on our roads, we're going to hit you with another toll. We've got to get out of that cycle of everything they want to do has to have more money. Why don't we just start looking within? I mean, let's run a checkbook like everybody else in America does, right? We balance it.
But the problem is we have an electorate that doesn't know the difference between politics or economics. People will say to you, they'll think they're talking economics. But
Yeah,
they'll talk politics to you. Say, and I would say, wait a minute, you're talking about a tax rate here. You're talking about distribution of resources. That's really what you're talking. That's economic. That's not political. You're making it
right.
political because that's the prism through which you decide to look at this and address this issue. So until we get it, maybe we're starting to get an electorate that sees the light only because things were so bad these last 4 years that they got it, and that's more hope than you know.
Hope springs eternal. But my
Well,
father always said, R.I.P., Dad, but he always said, when they pull the curtain, they always vote with the wallet. And I think, Tim, to your point, I think people have voted with their wallet because finally they've been saying, hey, no more, no mas. I've had enough. I can't pay this anymore. Everybody's living, at the waterline, and something's got to change. I think you could see a very fast impact here by this new government coming in. And I think that they're very smart and keen to do it. And if they hit the wallet book of everybody out there and extend tax cuts, perhaps create more tax cuts while making the spending cuts, that's the key, right? I think you could have a group that, they turned out a lot of votes.
let
And
me
I
raise
think
a
people,
different. Let me raise a different point here.
go ahead.
I think things were so bad because they treated the electorate like mushrooms.
Yeah.
They fed them shit, kept them in the dark.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
and I think Musk changed that when he bought Twitter and changed it. Because
Yep.
now this source that our media uses for all their leads, they all watch X, and they pull information out of X. So what he's done is lifted the curtain and unwound the mushroom scenario. So I think that's probably the most optimistic thing to have. We now have a massive, really too massive, if you want to call Truth Social part of that. We have we have a network that is showing the supply side of the world. And the best example I can think of, Syria fell over the weekend. In my mind, the guy who did that was Netanyahu. Biden is taking credit for it. He's saying it's our policy that led to this. Now, without a Twitter, people wouldn't see the other side of this. So
I don't think anybody believes that he has had anything to do. But on your point, look at the positives that have hit the world since the November election, right? You've had the first truce between Hezbollah and Israel,
Yeah.
followed by Zelensky suddenly saying, We may have to cede territory. And then you have this Syria collapse. Syria has been the spigot in which the Iranian money went through to Hezbollah and Hamas. So all these things are beginning to happen. The next is going to be a settlement in the Ukraine. These are major geopolitical positives ever since this election.
Right, he's not even president yet.
Not even
Mexico,
president.
Mexico held a caravan up, you know,
Yep.
something, yeah, X many thousands of people. Mexico is turning them back. Um, Trudeau flew down and was informed that he might be the governor of the 51st state. You know, so, yeah, I agree with you. It's pretty big stuff that's happened fairly early.
Yeah,
And
in a
then and
month's
then
time.
don't forget 100% tariffs if the BRIC nations want to go out with a new
Yeah,
currency.
yeah, that was a real big one. That's right.
Yeah.
So all these things that are beginning, it's like the sheriff is back in town,
Right.
and it's that euphoria that could carry us. And watch the technology. We know Musk doesn't sign up on this without having a very good vision, and he knows where it's all going. Heck, they're catching rockets, man, coming back down. They know what's in the pipeline. And I watched this Tesla. I've been watching it, Fred. I've talked about it for ages and ages. And I always said, now I see the parallels all coming into this collision course. You've got robotics, you've got the computing space, you've got driverless cars, AI. It's all under his realm. Quantum computing they're running, and
And the demographics fit right into that.
yeah,
You get an aging demographic.
yes,
These people are not going to own cars anymore.
yep,
They're gonna have a robotic Uber. You know? Why would you own a car if you're 80 years old? You got to worry about driving. You want to go out and have a drink with somebody at that point in your life. You need a car? No, no. There's a robo taxi that's going to be show up at your house.
yep,
We're in the Jetsons.
yeah.
It's weird.
Yeah. Yeah, they were ahead of their time,
What was the name of the dog?
That's a good trivia question.
Trivia.
Right.
Yeah.
Rover? No, it wasn't
Art
Rover.
Carney wasn't Norton? It wasn't Norton?
Well, certainly a lot. We've touched on a lot of points, and anything else to add from Bitcoin to interest rates to really gone to full circle.
I
Yeah.
went out and bought some more Palatine today. To me, they knocked it down. It's down like 6%, 7%. And
Palantir, that one, it's in the 70s.
Palantir, yeah,
Yeah,
Palantir.
yeah,
PLTR, I think, yeah.
yeah.
Uh,
PLTR, yeah.
yeah, it was
Yep.
down like 6% today.
Was it really?
Yeah.
But I think it's been up about 20 or 30
Oh, yeah, oh,
in the
yeah,
last month. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I bought 40 calls not too long ago, and I wrote 45 puts, and they're worthless now, you know. So now
Yeah.
I'm taking the money and buying some stock with it.
Yeah.
Let's see what the ECB does. They're going to cut a quarter, and let's see if Bank of Canada gives us the 0.5%. And I think that's going to be a big positive this week.
So do you think 100? Do you think parity in the euro is in danger, or
I think it should be there, right? It should have already been there. But we know at this level, once you get under 105, the quasi-governmental agencies all come in and buy each other's debt, and they buy the euro again. So
yeah? I think the dollar. My opinion, my point for a while has been the dollar is a lot of reasons to buy it, but it's too overbought. You know. So maybe
Yeah, I
we
think
do
it's
that.
overbought. I think the focus has shifted from interest rates, and people are recognizing that there's other reasons to own the dollar, mostly capital flows. If everything's quiet and the focus is on the Fed, and you're looking at prevailing interest rates, we lost
Yeah.
Steve, I think.
Yeah.
Then you watch the Fed and the focus of the Fed, but the Fed has made itself irrelevant here. So I think it's capital flows, and here we are. We might as well kill this and
Yep.
It's at
Well,
the end of
thanks,
it.
Tim.
All
Thanks,
right.
Steve. I'll give. Take care.
Take care.